So, hey, everybody, Stephanie Baker here, Executive Director of Life in Abundance, and we are back on the couch episoding. Today, we have our guest, Dr. Ray Benedetto. I'll introduce him in just a few minutes. But what we want to do is remind everybody of the purpose, the objectives for why we are running on the couch as our podcast, and that would be threefold. We actually want to be able to bring in counselors and counseling topics to help people who are thinking about possibly going in to counseling for the very first time. A lot of the topics that you hear about and read about sound pretty foreign and in some cases pretty scary. And so we want to take some of the mystery out of that and give you hope if that's something that you are being led to do is to seek counseling. Here's a disclaimer before we go any further. I am what is known as a clinical pastoral counselor. It means that I'm not licensed by the state of South Carolina. And so I need to give that disclaimer. Now, having said that, there will be times that I will be interviewing counselors that are not part of my team. I have a mixture of pastoral counselors and licensed professional counselors by the state of South Carolina on my team. But we will be interviewing multiple different counselors on multiple different topics. And so you'll get a wide variety of information. The next thing that we want to do is bring information about functional medicine and nutrition. And I work with clients and treat clients in front of me as a whole human being, not just symptoms, not just an issue or problem. We look at the whole person, and that's why I feel like those discussions are necessary. And in that process, I am bringing in and will be bringing in functional medicine practitioners, functional nutrition practitioners. I'm also a certified functional nutrition counselor. And so my passion is helping people to be the best they can be, the healthiest that they can be. Because when we feel better, we think better. And our life is better when we're feeling better. And spiritually, we feel better when all of those things are working together. And finally, the third thing we want to bring into these conversations is that there are local ministries here in the Greenville and the upstate area that you may not be aware of, and they may have wonderful resources to offer. And the only time you might hear of them is if we're talking about them. And so I want to highlight various ministries throughout our episodes of the podcast. And so I am honored to have you join us. And today we are bringing back, as I said, the first time I interviewed him, one of my favorite people. And a disclaimer goes on here that I am also his client, his patient. He has treated me. And so another disclaimer, because we've got to get all those out right up front. I am not paid to interview him. I am not paid to talk about all the wonderful things that he does for clients. This is coming firsthand because I have been a client or patient, whatever you want to call me there. And so I'm going to speak some today with Dr. Ray Benedetto. He is a doctor of chiropractic medicine. He is a much sought after functional medical professional and natural thyroid expert. That is, as he said in our last interview, his passion. He called it a small passion. I think it's a huge passion for him and definitely a calling for him. He's also founder of the Rapid Thyroid Recovery System, of which I have been through. And today's topic for On the Couch is going to be Epstein Barr. Isn't that just fun to even think about? But here we are. Dr. Benedetto is going to help make that topic one that is easily understood because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And unfortunately, a lot of that misinformation, I think, hangs around in mainstream medicine. The last time Dr. Benedetto joined us, we talked about the benefit and the definition of root cause medicine. So, Dr. Benedetto, welcome. We are so happy to have you back to talk about things today, and we appreciate your time. How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you for having me back anytime.
Sure, absolutely. So I thought today what we would do is focus in, and I also want to have you back another time so we can talk about Hashimoto's. I know, but that'll still be part of what we end up talking about today by nature of how those things are related. But today I'd like us to focus on the big bad Epstein Barr virus. What can you tell us? I know that you have treated me for that. So, disclaimer for that. What can you tell us about your experience in working with Epstein Barr, the virus?
So it is a super common virus. The numbers are pretty staggering as far as like most of the population has been exposed to this virus.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's a problem for everybody, but but it is very ubiquitous. Like it is a virus that is everywhere. Most people have been exposed to it. It like most things in modern medicine, really the only thing they ever concern themselves with is the acute presentation of the virus, right? So
Right.
this virus, Epstein Barr virus or EBV, is the virus that causes mononucleosis. Okay, mono, which I've had. I had it in college. It was not fun.
Same here.
Um, that's really only the only place that with any chronic infections, to be honest with you, we're focusing on this one today because it's a super common one and it can be a very problematic one. Um, so the acute version of the virus would be diagnosed as mononucleosis. Many people that I see that are walking around out there on planet Earth never had mononucleosis, and they've been exposed to this virus and they have this virus, right? They never developed any acute symptoms, but they came in contact with the virus, they contracted the virus. It kind of just goes dormant, like it goes into hiding, if you will. And they go through life and they never have any problems. There is another subset of the population, obviously, either who has had it and they know they had it, or they don't know they had it, but they have the virus that can go on to develop a chronic infection.
Right.
That's really the part of the story where it ends for Western mainstream medicine. They almost don't even acknowledge that it's possible or that it could ever be a problem, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. And both of us being living proof of that. Um, so let me ask a couple of questions right out of the gate. Going through school, one of the things that I heard is that in in somebody's history, if they've had strep throat, many, you hear about kids having strep throat throughout, high school and that kind of stuff. What I was told or presented with is that in many cases, strep and mono can be co-occurring, but they will test for strep. If they get a positive strep, they don't go any further. Is that
Sure.
a pretty accurate statement?
Yep, especially in kids.
Right, right.
That's usually who gets strep throat.
Yes.
They got a rapid strep test. They stick a thing in your throat and be like, "Yep, you got strep," and then that's where it stops. Like that's
Yeah.
where the
And
the investigation ends,
yes,
and
and
then it's
that would
antibiotics.
explain, yeah, and it would explain why a lot of people say, "No, I've never had mono," and then they're surprised to find out that,
Mhm.
well, yes, indeed, you have Epstein-Barr, and you don't have to have a full-blown, mono, acute mono to carry the virus or to catch the virus. Just being around somebody. I mean, when we were kids, this is so gross. We chewed each other's chewing gum. It was so disgusting. We would
Right.
like drink after each other, and so it's easily explained when you're a kid. But also if you've cared for somebody who has mono or has had that. And I think a lot of times what I will talk to clients about is that, as you were saying, a majority of the population, I think it's like over 90%, carries the
Mhm.
virus. And all mono is Epstein-Barr, but Epstein-Barr does not manifest as mono in all people. um,
Correct.
and I explain a little bit. It's a little bit like chickenpox. The concept of chickenpox is actually from the same virus family, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. And when you have the virus as a kid, it's chickenpox. If it comes back, if it reactivates as an adult, we call that shingles. It's
Mhm.
not chickenpox anymore. It's actually shingles and much more painful, but it resides in the body. And Epstein Barr. Let's get this out right now. It is not irrevocable, correct? I mean, it is going to be in your system. If you have it, you're never going to get rid of it.
Correct. And
Okay.
that's the case with most chronic viruses. Like you talk about, a herpes virus for chickenpox. Like you get
Mm-hmm.
chickenpox, you still have that virus. Some people get shingles, some people don't. If you didn't get shingles, you still got the virus. Yeah, these viruses don't go anywhere. They're there to stay.
Right. So let's also define chronic virus. Now,
Mhm.
you mentioned acute is I'm presenting with mono, sore throat, swollen lymph nodes, possibly running a fever, that kind of stuff, and I test positive for it. But chronic, how do I know if it's chronic?
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, many people, laypersons and to be honest with you, even medical professionals don't most of the time don't connect the dots between someone's symptoms and the
Mhm.
fact that they could have a chronic reactivated viral infection. Um, Again, partially because they don't have anything to treat it. Like there's nothing to do. There's no medical treatment for a reactivated Epstein Barr virus. Like they don't have
Right,
anything. It's probably why they don't
right.
test for it half the times. Um, but and again, we'll see more chronic symptoms. Like we won't see acute onset symptoms that go away
Right.
in 7 to 10 days. Like we will see chronic, persistent, all the time symptoms. Epstein Barr, the big one's chronic fatigue, right? So
Yes.
that's, it all else being equal, if you just had a reactivated Epstein Barr virus infection that was like causing your symptoms, chronic fatigue is
Mhm.
probably at the top of the list.
Yes, it has
Um,
been. I mean, it is it's the top complaint with anybody that I've worked with as a certified functional nutrition counselor. And actually, it was the same for myself personally. It is a tired that I can't explain unless you've experienced it. Like you can't put words to it. Really, it's just beyond. I'm fatigued. I had a long day. It's just a lethargy that's really heavy. Um,
yeah, clinical fatigue. That's clinical
yes.
fatigue. That's not just
Okay.
I had a long day, long week, I'm a little beat up.
Right. And
It's like I
so,
have zero reason to be fatigued, but I am done.
but here we are. I can't get out of bed or
Yeah.
I can't get off the couch. So, all right. So, if mainstream medicine really doesn't treat that unless it's an acute, and even then, when it's acute, I mean, it's viral.
It's viral.
So,
They don't give
right.
antivirals for Epstein Barr.
Right. I have read an interesting study, and it was, I forget how many years ago it was. They were talking about considering treating it with something like acyclovir.
Sure.
And I don't, but it has never made it into mainstream anything that I've seen or connected with. And because I send clients depending on what's going on with them your way. Um, you tend to treat Epstein Barr in a holistic style.
Yeah.
Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, do I occasionally get people come to me and like the majority of their symptoms or their clinical manifestation is all from Epstein Barr? Sure. That's probably a smaller minority. Epstein Barr is usually on the list of things that we have to look for and we have to treat that's adding up to cause their XYZ. Last time we are obviously, do a lot with autoimmune disease. So a lot of times Epstein Barr is one of the cards in the deck that's causing, the the full house, if you will,
Yes.
of autoimmune disease. So but yes, but so treatment of it specifically, I use homeopathics. The trick with a lot of these chronic infections, there's kind of a two-pronged attack. And this is again I say that long-winded kind of like intro. This is kind of usually part of someone's bigger care plan. Like we're doing
Mhm.
other stuff. Oh, and we're going to layer in these protocols to manage the Epstein-Barr virus. And the
Mhm.
goal is to really to try and get it back into hiding, so to speak, like to drive it
Right.
to dormancy, so it's not active, it's not wreaking havoc, it's kind of contained, if you will, by our immune system. So I use homeopathics because there's a two-pronged attack. Number one, these chronic infections produce what are called biofilms. So biofilms are like a little force field that these viruses and these organisms, really in general, not just viruses, but like pathogenic organisms, for them to be able to hide in our body from our immune system, they create these biofilms, like a little, like a biodome is like the analogy I give. It's like this little force field that our immune system can't penetrate to get at and attack the virus, right? To contain it. So they create these little biofilms that have to be broken down. So you have to break down these biofilms. And there's natural agents you can use. I use different remedies and herbals to so there's natural agents that you can use to break down these biofilms, but you have to do that kind of first and ongoing is to keep those biofilms broken down so that way then you can go in with targeted. I use homeopathic remedies. I use a company called Desert Biologics. Desbio, I think is the website, desbio.com. So I use targeted homeopathics then in combination with the agents to break down the biofilms, and those
Mhm.
homeopathics help the immune system really to better identify and better target the viruses so that they can contain them better. That's the goal. And there are specific agents or specific homeopathics depending on the infectious agent. So there's a specific one for Epstein-Barr. There's a specific protocol or remedy for cytomegalovirus or herpes virus or a whole host of other things of chronic infections that people could have. Lyme.
Yeah, wow. So, question, is it possible that I can actually test, well, I guess it would be possible. So I test um, negative for Lyme and it's Epstein-Barr instead. Like, is that ever missed in the
Sure.
reverse?
Oh,
Okay.
gosh, yeah. Yeah, because
Okay.
most again, I check out a lot of people,
Right.
but I don't think I've ever seen a patient come into my office with blood work done by other mainstream medical practitioners
Mhm.
and they had
Yeah.
their Epstein-Barr checked.
Right.
Never.
I
Never. They
no,
don't
and
even
I
check
would
for it,
agree.
you know.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree
you
with
could have
that.
it. I mean, you could have a negative Lyme disease test and still have Lyme disease.
Right.
The CDC's Lyme testing is notoriously short-sighted. But so you could test negative for Lyme and have Lyme disease, but you could definitely come in with symptoms very similar to Lyme and test negative for Lyme and have some other viral infection going on. Absolutely.
And one of those symptoms being fatigue
Yeah.
as well.
Huge.
So, all right. So we talked about chronic fatigue, not chronic fatigue, the condition, but that being a symptom,
Mhm.
extenuating fatigue being a symptom of Epstein-Barr. Besides that, what are two or three of the other hallmark symptoms for Epstein-Barr?
This is the tricky part, right? Because it's very
Mhm.
similar symptoms for all these kinds of for all kind of chronic illness type stuff.
Mhm.
Musculoskeletal stuff, right? Muscle pains, joint pains, aches and pains, that kind of stuff for sure. Um, and neurological stuff. So these viruses hang out in the nervous system, right? So again, we come back to the example of that's where they hide. They can hide really well in the nervous system. So we use the chickenpox example, right? If somebody does get shingles, it's almost always along a nerve root. So
Yeah.
they'll get the herpes outbreaks around like the rib cage or down their face
Yeah.
or down their neck, and you can almost trace it with your finger because the virus is breaking out along a nerve root. So they hang out in the nerve roots, like the
Right.
base of the nerve. And then when they break out, they go along the course of the nerve. Epstein-Barr is no different. Not so much on peripheral nerves like that, but it likes to hang out in the central nervous system. So any and all kinds of neurological stuff. That's good. And that could and that's again stuff we see in across a lot of different health concerns,
Right.
right? Brain fog,
Mhm.
again, fatigue, brain fatigue, right? Mood stuff, headache, we'll see some nervous system signs and symptoms, if you will. Autonomic issues, right? Problems with the autonomic nervous system.
So is it possible, and I'm really stretching here, okay, but that's how, that's kind of how my brain's working a little bit. Um, is it possible that if I have an outbreak of shingles, that I can also be fighting Epstein-Barr and that have anything to do with the outbreak of shingles? Can those
Sure.
two things? Okay. Because both
Yeah,
of
they
them
can.
are nerve path, you
They
know.
definitely can. Because the reason these viruses, most of the time, the reason these viruses cause a problem is because someone's got immune issues. So someone's got issues with their immune system. So their immune system gets all beat up, and in a norm, like I said, look, I had mononucleosis. I have Epstein-Barr virus. I don't have any symptoms of a chronic infection, but I still got the virus.
Mhm.
Because I count on and I work really hard at keeping myself healthy and keeping my immune system healthy. So my immune system keeps it contained and keeps an eye on it, if you will,
Yes.
right? Whereas these viruses can kind of wreak havoc if the immune system falls asleep at the wheel a little bit.
Yeah. So, all right. So you were talking about managing it, and I want us to come back to that because it is a decided effort. There are things you have to work on if you
Yeah,
are somebody that fights chronic Epstein Barr. But when we're talking about Epstein Barr and we're thinking through that, is it possible that Epstein Barr, and I think Epstein Barr, we've talked, it likes to lodge in the liver, in the thyroid, in joint, actually. Is it possible that my liver enzymes as a patient would be elevated because I have chronic Epstein Barr. Is that a legitimate possibility?
That is, yes. It would be the first thing I would look for.
Right.
But you could see that, yes.
Okay. So somebody who's looking, maybe they're not on medication that could possibly be raising liver enzymes, but it's part of the big picture. And again, we look at blood work as a whole. We're looking for trends. We don't just necessarily, unless we're testing the Epstein-Barr titers, we're looking at somebody as a whole to try to figure out patterns and what might be the next route to go.
Hmm.
Talking about that, let's talk about how do I determine if Epstein-Barr is what I have. If a doctor's not going to order it, and I have fought, and I've told you this before too, I have fought to get clients who've come to me tested for that because they'll be sitting in front of me and say, I just don't know. Like, I'm so tired. I don't have the energy. I feel like I'm depressed. Well, when we start talking about things, the mental health piece of it, yeah, they're tired and they're at their best, but something is clicking for me. And I know that this is not standard depression. There's something else going on in their body. And when they get tested, the ones that have gone and gotten tested, and I encourage them to go to a lab where I write the slip for them to go and get tested, and they don't have to have the conversation of, and this is how it goes. Well, everybody has Epstein Barr. There's no need to test for it. Well,
Not wrong, but
no,
not
no,
helpful
but it's
either.
not the full story.
Not wrong, but not helpful either.
No, not at all. Because then they come back going, it's just I'm being told that all of my tests are normal. Well, the tests that are being done maybe are normal, but we haven't done that one.
Scratching the
So
surface, yeah.
yeah, and when they come back, their numbers, there are titers that are measured. Tell us about what you're looking for to determine in what's measured. What are you looking for as a practitioner to know that, hey, this person is in a reactivated state?
Yeah, so on a traditional Epstein-Barr panel, there's four different immunoglobulin markers that are looked at. One of them is typically elevated, and it's funny because you get these tests back, and it says it right on the labs, like it's like a canned response. They're just like, underneath the lab is writing it in there that this is suggestive of a past infection. There's typically one immunoglobulin marker that will be elevated when someone is acute, when someone has mononucleosis. And
IgM.
then, yes, yep. Typically, we will not see that one elevated. With with a chronic infection, we'll see the other three elevated.
Okay.
And they're usually off the charts. Like, I mean, you've seen a bunch
Yes.
of them. That's usually like, and I run them on people, and they're just like, it's like it'll be like, 0 to 19 is negative, and anything 19 or higher is positive, and everybody's like greater than 600. Like
Right.
it's like off the charts. And then
Right.
underneath it, it'll say, these results are indicative of a past infection, not of an acute infection, which would be mononucleosis. So that's
Right.
typically what we'll see, the pattern that we'll see on the blood work. And to kind of even circle around to your
Yeah.
your first your first point, I mean, I can order these tests for people, but if someone doesn't have like a me or a you that can direct them and they just wanted to get them done, that's the one good thing nowadays is you can just pay for these tests and get them done yourself. And
Yes.
like
Yeah.
even all your big labs like Quest and LabCorp and stuff like that, they have
Mhm.
cash prices on all this stuff now. You don't even need a script. You could like go on their website and like pay $50 and order the test and
Yes.
go get the blood drawn, the phlebotomy done at one of these labs, and then they'll give you the results.
And I think part of what might be somewhat prohibitive for people is that testing is not cheap, right? No
Mm,
matter what, it's free to us, like available to us is what I mean by that.
yeah,
But yet the other part is insurance may or may not cover it. And you need to know that ahead of time if you do go to, a place like Any Lab Test Now, which I happen to use for my clients and have an
right,
agreement with them so that they get a little bit of a better, fee for things. But um, understanding what to ask for. I know
right.
a lot of the labs will do multiple panels. Some of those are packages, and you may not
Mhm.
need the entire package of four different panels. And Epstein Barr, you're really just it is its own panel, and it's measuring, as you said, four different what they are calling titers or immunoglobulins. Um,
Mhm.
so, all right, so let's go back. You mentioned that you work really, really hard because you have Epstein Barr, but you work really hard to keep it in, what would we call that? To keep it sort of in remission?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
keep it in check, keep it dormant.
Okay. Okay. So what are some things that you are actively doing to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, I do them with myself, obviously, and I do them with my patients. That's the
Mhm.
point. But yeah, that's the thing is the like an Epstein-Barr virus infection or chronic infection of any kind doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? You still have to do other things to almost sometimes lay the foundation to be able to then start treating the chronic virus, right? So that's why we
Right.
always start with some dietary, some nutritional work, right? We need to be eating an anti-inflammatory, clean diet. We typically need to be doing a little bit of supplementation to kind of help fill in our blind spots like vitamin D deficiencies and things like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Um, we always want to make sure that we're optimizing gut health. We always want to make sure that we're optimizing detoxification, liver health, cellular detoxification. And we always want to be make sure we're doing those things with diet and nutrition. Everyone always thinks diet and nutrition. Well, let's say lifestyle, right?
Love
Diet,
that.
yes, diet, nutrition, proper
Mhm.
sleep, stress management, like these things are all super duper important as well. We got to do all those things too. And we have to do sometimes almost do all of those things first before we would start getting, before we would just right away start throwing homeopathics at a chronic Epstein-Barr virus. Because if all that other stuff is not handled, then the treatment's not going to nearly be as effective or as effective at all. Um, the targeted remedies that we're trying to use for the virus. Like the
Yeah.
body has to be able to handle what we're trying to do for it. And without that foundation laid down, we're trying to build the
Right.
third floor of the house before we even set the foundation, you know.
That's right. And it's not just a quick fix. This is what I tell clients too. It took you years to get where you are. If you have a chronic infection, it's been there
Right.
for years. You're not going to go into remission in 2 minutes. This is,
No.
as you say, it's a multi-pronged approach. And there is an order in which, in which to do that, which is part of what I love about the program that you run. Many things I love about that, but I love that because it's not confusing when you're treating someone. It's not confusing. You have every step and purpose
There's a
for the step.
hierarchy. Yep.
Yes, and the
Yeah.
reason, and we know that when people understand why they're doing something, their probability of success in doing it jumps. And so sustainable, we want sustainable results. We don't want perfection, but we want sustainable results. I mean,
Yep.
most of us, if we were truthful, go, yeah, I'd love for it to be perfect, but we also know that life happens, right? Life happens, and so we want to understand the cause and effect, because if I understand that when life happens, I can get right back up and get back on it. I'm not questioning, okay, what do I need to do next? I know what it is I need to do next. Um, with
And chronic and sorry to cut you off there, but
No, go
like
ahead.
and and these protocols do take time, you know?
Yes,
Like I mean we're talking years, but like an Epstein-Barr protocol, for example, most chronic viral infection stuff that I'm doing with a patient, like 2 months minimum. Like the
yes.
starting point of the protocol is just we're
Minimum.
gonna do this 2 month protocol and then we're gonna reassess how you're doing at that time. It may need to go longer.
Right, right. I know that I have had clients also work with um, antiviral supplements, monolaurin and
Yep.
L-lysine for
Yep.
those.
Those are great.
Um, yeah, and I hear a lot that they start to feel better. One of the other side effects from Epstein-Barr that I neglected to mention myself was interrupted sleep. Now, that's one of those things too that if you're also hypothyroid or hyperthyroid, you can have some sleep interruption with those
Right.
too, if I'm not mistaken. So, but specifically with Epstein Barr, I know that that's one of them. And so, L-lysine, typically, I hear from clients who have taken that. They start to sleep better than they have in a very long time, which is encouraging, to hear and to get results, to start to feel better, not perfect, but to feel better. The smallest thing is encouraging when you felt horrible for a long time.
Right.
um, so let's talk quickly about Epstein and its links to other conditions. Number one, it is also linked to MS, if I'm not mistaken. There is a link to,
Autoimmune.
yep.
Autoimmune.
Okay. It's linked. I have heard that, and I've actually experienced this with my client base. If I think that there may have been something going on, I will ask, "Do you have ringing in your ears?" and from time to time. And the response that I get from just about everybody who's tested positive for Epstein-Barr reactivation is, yes, I do. Why'd you ask? Well, because it's a hallmark of that, as is vertigo. Have you worked with clients with vertigo and you believe that it's possibly related to Epstein?
Loves to hang out in the nervous system.
Yes. Yeah. So
Loves
of
to hang
course.
out. That is where it's hanging out and where it's hiding and where it'll usually wreak its havoc. It's one of the reasons why the chronic fatigue is bad too, is because
Yes.
the effect it's having on the neurons, the nervous system.
Yeah. Wow. I
It's
mean, it's
taxing
just
them.
a
So yeah, the nervous system um, symptoms are big.
yeah. So if somebody wants to talk to you after hearing this, if they're thinking that, oh my gosh, maybe what I have is Epstein-Barr, they can either contact me and we will work with them. But if they already know that they're hypothyroid, but nobody has ever told them about Epstein-Barr. Again, reviewing Epstein-Barr, the cells like to lodge, or the virus likes to lodge in the thyroid cells,
Mhm.
thus, being related to Hashimoto's, the autoimmune, as you say. If they have Hashimoto's, and they want to talk to you about a possible undercurrent infection of
Mhm.
Epstein-Barr, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so and you what you know as well, and you can feel free to share with your audience too. Um, it's not hard. I'm not hard to get a hold of. Like it's like I'll give it to you. You can share it with whoever you want. Like here's a link to I work virtually with
Mhm,
people all over the country, so here's a link to my
mhm,
calendar. You can literally click on it and be like, all right, has he got something available this week, next week? I can schedule a time to chat with them. Totally. I don't charge for that, an initial consultation, just for us to chat and see if what's going on with someone is something I can help you with. I'll share that link with you. My website is super simple. It's drraybenedetto.com. So it's DR, right? That's the
drraybenedetto.com.
abbreviation for doctor. So DR Ray Benedetto, Benedetto, .com. So that one's easy to find. Um, and a simple Google search will find me as well.
Okay. And if anybody's looking to talk to him, I can also help connect you. So if
Yes, Stephanie has
yeah,
my link and my number
yeah,
and my
would
home
love
address and who knows what else.
And we'll mention I am getting ready to talk to your lovely, beautiful wife, Dr. Allison Benedetto, coming up in the next month. Once our calendars have aligned, that day gets here. We're going to talk about hormones. That's the big hot topic with everybody wanting to know too about hormones and being prescribed hormones when maybe hormones are not the thing to prescribe at that time. Um, you know, so we're gonna be looking forward to seeing her. You guys are an awesome couple. Is there anything else that you would want somebody to know if they are fighting chronic Epstein Barr? Then I have one more question after that.
No, I mean I think we covered it pretty well. I mean the the education, the information part of it. That's why this is so important, and that's why I'm thrilled to be here. And I thank you for having me here. It's
Sure.
really just it's getting the information out to people that it's even a thing, or
Right.
that it's something that needs to be looked at because they don't get. Most people, 99% of people aren't getting that information they're not getting that help and not even getting the information from their doctors. So they're maybe at
Yeah.
least doing it on their own, or they maybe
Mhm.
stumbled onto someone like you or me who's going to be like, hey, we need to look
Right.
at this. Other than that, they're never even going to know about it.
Right. And my history, but others may not. And that is that when I went back to school to become a certified functional nutrition counselor, I studied Epstein-Barr. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking at first, this sounds a lot like one particular client. And the further we got into it, the more I was like, uh-oh, this sounds a lot like me. And so,
Right.
right. And so I tested myself for that and shock, 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 positive, like numbers off off the radar.
Yeah,
Basically, as you like to say, they quit counting.
they do.
And
Yes.
yes, and so that led me to then go, well, I was diagnosed as hypothyroid several years ago. Nobody ever talked to me about Epstein Barr. We
Nope.
just talked about symptoms. Wonder if I have Hashimoto's. In fact, I was told I didn't, and no test was ever done. And so I
Right.
then tested myself for Hashimoto's, and Merry Christmas, I was Hashimoto's positive, you know. And so for me, when I got that proof, right? I wept actually, not because I felt like I'd been given a life sentence, but because I had answers. And
Yep.
that matters because we can work with what we know. It's what we don't know that's so frustrating, you know. And again, being told something, you know, like, well, your lab results are normal. Okay, but I feel like awful. Like this isn't right. And I think one of the biggest compliments that people say that I know that see you is that you treat the person, not the diagnosis. You're treating the person. You're looking at all things together and considering all things, lifestyle, you know, nutrition, all of it. And I love that. And so I would encourage anybody that is struggling with some of the symptoms that we've talked about, have a consultation. Dr. Benedetto is incredibly generous with his time and consultations. I mean, it's almost unheard of to be able to actually talk to a live doctor, not an assistant. I'm not saying anything bad about assistants, but it's nice to talk to the person who's going to be treating me, you know,
Yeah.
and ask whatever question I need to ask. And so I really appreciate that about your practice, you and Dr. Allison both. And so I remember talking to Dr. Allison. This is a huge compliment to her. Also, I asked about a supplement that I was on. It was working great. I'm like, how long can I take this? She picked up the phone and actually asked the manufacturer some questions on my behalf. And I don't know professionals that do that. You know, and I really, really appreciated the extra time that she took to care. You know, she wanted to back everything up clinically, and she did, and I appreciated it because I know how busy y'all schedules are. So, and on that note. Thank you so much again for taking your valuable time to come and talk to us. Will you come back and talk about specifically Hashimoto's? I promise that's the thing we will focus on in the next.
Anytime, anytime you need me, I'll make myself available.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Benedetto.
You got it, Steph. Thanks.